So hey there YouTube, back again with a update video or a progress video or a something video on the good old 848 project. So between Facebook and some forums and that sort of thing, those of you know that since I bought this for a steal of a deal last fall, just over a year ago I guess, I bought it knowing that the speedometer didn't work, and to me it seemed like a fairly straightforward solution when you went on the forums. It's the speedo sensor cable. Not that. It's a fuse. Not that. It's the air gap between the Hall effect sensor and the steel pickup on the brake rotor. Not that. There's a break or a short somewhere in the harness. Not that. So relatively recently I kind of did the classic shotgun approach to motorcycle repair. Found a complete full meal deal of an 848 in terms of the electrical system for an amazing price based on what people were listing these parts for on eBay, not necessarily selling these parts on eBay. So what I ended up getting was a ECU dashboard, 2 sets of keys, code card, ignition tumbler, and what are they called? Brain freeze here. Immobilizer from an 848. And during that process, I added and subtracted components and took things on and took things off and yada yada yada, and got to the point where I was 99% sure that the ultimate problem is why everything would work except the speedometer on this thing had to do a fault with the ECU, because I replaced the speedo sensor with a brand new one. I checked the air gap between the speedo sensor and the button or the Hall effect sensor. I replaced the entire wiring loom on this thing. And so what I was able to do was to change out the ECU that came with this thing with the one I bought off of eBay, and the bike didn't run well because it had the wrong map in the ECU, but I was able to get the speedo to work on the stock dash. Because the other thing is, the dash that I got with this cavalcade of parts had 48,000 kilometers on it. So cross fingers. I think that if I swap this ECU out with the proper one, that the dashboard will retain the odometer, the bike will run properly because it has Termignoni exhaust on it, and the bloody speedometer will work. Let's hope, because just through some crazy googling and trying to find the right part number, which is 965194008B, which is the 848 ECU with the Termignoni race map already installed by the factory. That's what I found on ebay.uk for a ridiculously low price. Not free, not cheap, but considering what ECUs go for, it's a classic example of, I think it was Ducati Bristol, had this as new old stock in their shop that no one wanted and they couldn't seem to sell. So they had it posted. I put in a cheeky lower bid. They accepted it, and as typical with my ongoing rants about shipping, it came from the UK to my doorstep today in less time than a I'm waiting on a valve cover for the TT project out of Florida, I think. Anyway, that's taking longer. So anyway, in not in real time, but today at the end of this video, you will either see me jumping with joy because I've finally sorted this bloody thing out, have a working speedometer, so then I can convert this street bike to a race bike back to a street bike over the winter, or you'll see me absolutely gutted, crushed, crestfallen, and resigned to the idea that the speedometer doesn't work, everything else works on the bike, no fault codes except for a speedo arrow code, sounds great, runs great, and I'll still have to sell it as a track bike with a title unless someone else can figure out a solution. So, cross fingers. I will be back in relatively short time because it doesn't take much to swap out these ECUs, and we will see if it works. In the 10 seconds between me shutting off the video and turning it on again, if you're a religious person of any denomination, pray for me and we'll see that it actually works. I'll be right back. Oh, happy day. Those of you who know me know that on various various circumstances I attribute my personality either to my Irish heritage or my German Deutsch heritage. Going back, ancestry.ca is a lovely thing. I think this is an example of a combination of my pessimistic Irishman, this isn't going to work, everything is crappy, nothing ever works the way you want it to that good old Teutonic stubbornness that, hindsight's 2020. I now, what I know or what I learned a minute ago, I wish I would have known a year ago, but that isn't the case, and sometimes you just have to slowly work through problems and do the whole shotgun parts gun approach to make things work. But hopefully it came out in the video. The speedometer works, and the bike runs properly, and it's finally at that point where I can say, yeah, I can now proceed and spend a bit more money on this thing and hook up some lights and add some parts to it and turn it into a street bike and then get it safetied and either ride it myself or sell it. I will likely, when this is all said and done, again being maybe more realistic than pessimistic, hopefully break even. Will be a 17-year-old motorcycle with under 10,000 kilometers on it. Not uncommon for a Ducati, but I know I've gone through it from front to back, and it's as pristine as you can probably get a 18-year-old motorcycle with 10,000 kilometers on it. So anyway, an interesting story, and I may have brought this up in some of the previous videos that I had, but yeah, it's been quite a process to sort this out, and I called Ducati Omaha, and not Ducati Omaha, Boulder Ducati. And again, the bike is now old enough now that what they may have known or learned from it working on them firsthand 15 years ago, the techs have forgotten, or they've moved on, or they've retired, or they're trying to sort out why a 2024 Panigale V4 with way more electronics than this doesn't work. So it's in this funny spot between way more complicated than a carbureted bike, but nowhere near as complicated as a modern bike, but they've sort of forgotten what some of the troubleshooting issues were. So what I've learned is if you're trying to fix one of these things yourself, and this is right up to date information, the ECU is independent from the dash and the key and the code card. All the forums I went on, if your dash is fried, you need to replace the ECU. If the ECU is fried, then you need to replace the ECU and the dash and the keys and the code card. Horse feathers. You can replace the ECU with a new one if that's where your problem is. The dash is critical. The dash is hooked up to the key, and there's an immobilizer in the key that needs to be in the mobilizer on the bike for anything to work. But the whole idea, and I saw this several times on forums, that if you replace the ECU, you have to replace everything. That's simply not the case. What you heard running earlier in this video, that is a Canadian bike from 2008 with a, where's my box? It doesn't matter. An ECU I bought from the UK with the right part number. 5 minutes to swap it once the fairings are off. and she fired right up and runs and everything that works. If you're getting that speedometer 36 error, my suggestion would be go through it in this order in terms of likelihood. A worn or dirty steel button on the brake rotor, clean that off. If it doesn't work, you can check the air gap, but if the air gap between the sensor and the brake rotor has been altered somehow, you've had a rear end accident on this bike. Like, it's bolted to the rear brake caliper hanger. So that distance is not the problem. If that doesn't fix it, then replace the speedometer sensor, and just do yourself a favor and buy a new one, because if you buy a used one like I did, then you don't know if the used one is also faulty. So just buy a new one. They're about $100, $75 to $100 US. If that doesn't fix the problem, I guess if you want, you can look at obvious breaks in the wiring loom, but honestly, my experience was I doubt it's that. The next thing is, if you can swap it out with an ECU that you know works, and just fire up the bike. If it's the wrong ECU for your exhaust system, it's going to run like shit, and there might even be a trouble code, like even a water temperature sensor code come up. Ignore it, spin the wheel. If the speedometer's working with the known good ECU, even if it isn't the right ECU for the model or the modifications, it'll work. And then if that's the case, start your eBay hunt and find a new ECU that'll work. It's like anything. When people sell electronics online as used, they always say no warranty. So you're taking a real risk. And then it's doubtful there's a problem with the dash, in my opinion. If the dash works, or unless the dash hasn't been crashed or something like that, it's probably not the dash. So I guess the benefit of me doing the whole parts gun shotgun approach last month and then just buying everything is I was able to go through and isolate the problem and learn about ECUs and how they operate vis-a-vis the dash. So of my 399, maybe 400 subscribers now, if you're trying to sort out one of these problems, that's my experience. And it was the hard way. It took me nearly a year, not working every day 8 hours a day, but thinking and ruminating and trying to figure this out. That's how I'd suggest doing it. So what that means then is that this will be converted to a street bike over the winter, because hey, it's the end of August and I'm in Canada, so there's not a whole lot of riding season left, but so be it. One thing about the long cold Canadian winters is that even with the unheated garage, it's better than watching curling. So we'll be taking the race body work. I've got some ideas around adding the lights and the turn signals and all the things that you need to make this thing safetied. I'll be doing some fiberglassing. I'll be doing some painting. Maybe I'll see if one of the local high schools doesn't want to try their hand at doing some painting, and it'll become a street legal motorcycle. If I could go back in time, and I'm not going to fully reveal how much I've spent on this, because education isn't free, kids. I could have bought this bike for $2,800 Canadian, bought the correct ECU, which I just did, shipped for around $200 Canadian, so that brings us up to $3,000, thrown an Octomart's Chinese body kit on it for around $700 Canadian, and had a street legal low mile $3,700 848 to either ride or flip. We all know that we don't make money flipping motorcycles. So anyway, typical to my luck or my stubbornness, that whole Teutonic heritage, I've done it the hard way, but it works. And this bike has been improved in so many other ways as I went from track bike to street bike to track bike to just fix the thing and make sure all the components work, which is pretty critical. So the other good news actually is that I've been able to drill down and see, okay, well, how long has the speedometer not worked for? Does this thing actually have 10,000 kilometers on it that aren't accounted for on the odometer? And it does not. I think the odometer is off by around 200 kilometers based on going back and seeing when the bike was registered, I guess written off as a rebuilt bike, and then re-registered as a bike, and then when the odometer failed. So yeah, it's not like someone unplugged the odometer. It has 30,000 kilometers on it, but it only registers 10. It's very close to what it was. So anyway, as you can see, I'm running on at the mouth, just mainly because I'm so happy that I finally sorted this thing out. And again, it was interesting that I was bragging in an earlier video about how cool it is that this bike isn't old for these parts to become valuable and vintage, and isn't new for these parts to become valuable because they're new. But with that comes the whole, mental information, the software that people have learned, because things get forgotten. And yeah, hindsight being 2020, I would have had this fixed and working properly by November, and either riding it all summer or would have sold it in the spring. But that's not how it worked out. So I think definitely Ockmarts is out of the picture. I'm going to use the race body work, and then, as I did with the F1 project, do some fun, neat things with some DOT or E-marked headlights and side lights, and come up with something a bit cool looking. So anyway, 3 cheers for me. I think about 6 times during this process I thought I had licked this problem, and I hadn't, but now I officially have. So that part of it's done. Either throughout the winter or maybe in the spring, I'll show what I've done in terms of doing the work with the headlights and coming up with a neat design, and how it's going to look paint wise, and we'll go from there. So thanks for watching. Thanks for sticking with it. If you've followed me throughout the trials and tribulations of this 848 project, but yeah, I think I'm at the point where I've got it sorted. So anyway, thanks again. Check back soon.